The film begins during the tense days of World War II, where over 400,000 British and French soldiers find themselves trapped on the beaches of Dunkirk, surrounded by German forces. Their only hope for survival, a miraculous evacuation. We're quickly introduced to a group of 6 British soldiers, carefully navigating the empty, war-torn streets of Dunkirk. They're searching for food and water in abandoned houses, but their search is abruptly interrupted by gunfire from unseen German forces. In the ensuing chaos, 5 of the men are killed, leaving only one survivor, Tommy. Barely escaping the hail of bullets, Tommy makes it to the beach, where he's met with a haunting sight. Thousands of soldiers are lined up, waiting desperately for a way out. As Tommy wanders along the shore, he comes across Gibson, a young soldier silently digging a grave in the sand for a fallen comrade. Tommy lends a hand, but their grim task is interrupted by German dive bombers overhead, dropping bombs on the defenseless soldiers below. In the aftermath of the attack, both Tommy and Gibson survive by a stroke of luck and continue to stick together as they come across a severely wounded soldier left on the sand. Thinking quickly, Tommy and Gibson pose as medics and rush the injured man towards a hospital ship, hoping to secure their own passage out of Dunkirk. As they push their way forward, they're blocked by a group of French soldiers, also desperate for a way out but being refused entry by British forces. Tommy and Gibson are similarly turned away, but manage to slip under cover of a concrete structure called the Mole, a narrow pier that's become the last line of hope for those stranded on the beach. Waiting by the pier for the next ship, Tommy and Gibson overhear a tense conversation among high-ranking officers. Commander Bolton of the Royal Navy, along with Colonel Wynant and a Rear Admiral, are deep in discussion, searching for a feasible escape strategy for their men. After some deliberation, they realize that using the Mole, a narrow concrete structure extending into the sea, might be their only viable option to board warships safely. As the soldiers await rescue, the vessel they were hoping to board becomes the target of another German air attack, sinking under a brutal onslaught. Soldiers scramble frantically, swimming for their lives amidst the debris. Tommy spots Alex, a soldier from the Highland Regiment, struggling in the water and helps him reach safety. Once ashore, Tommy, Gibson, and Alex disguise themselves as survivors from the downed vessel, blending in with the crowd and making their way onto a British Red Cross ship with other soldiers. Relieved for a moment, the trio finally gets some food and water on board, but Gibson appears visibly uneasy, pacing nervously. Suddenly, a torpedo hits, and the ship begins to sink, filling the lower decks with water. In a desperate act, Gibson manages to open a hatch, allowing Tommy, Alex, and a few others to escape. They swim frantically towards a small rescue boat, but it's overcrowded. Left with no other choice, the soldiers cling to a rope attached to the boat and swim back to shore, exhausted and disheartened. It seems that despite every effort, Dunkirk's grasp is unbreakable. After a grueling few hours, the surviving soldiers regroup, joining a small detachment of the Highland Corps. They hear of a beached boat stuck in the intertidal zone, which can only be moved once the tide rises. It's a waiting game, and the soldiers brace themselves, hoping the incoming tide will finally provide them. As the soldiers wait anxiously in the stranded boat, a sailor unexpectedly returns. The British soldiers immediately take him into custody, suspicious that he might be an enemy spy. To their surprise, he reveals himself as Dutch and warns them they're currently on German-held land. Before they can process the gravity of their location, gunfire rings out, and bullets begin piercing through the boat's hull, letting in water. Realizing the German soldiers outside are simply using the boat for target practice, unaware it's hiding anyone, Tommy urges everyone to stay hidden and avoid retaliating, hoping the attackers will lose interest. Yet as the water starts filling the boat faster, Alex suggests a grim solution. They should lighten the load by throwing Gibson overboard. Tommy protests, reminding Alex that Gibson saved their lives before, but Alex remains resolute, declaring that survival isn't about fairness. Fueling the tension, he accuses Gibson of being a German spy, pointing out that Gibson hasn't spoken a word, likely hiding his accent. In the midst of this mounting pressure, Gibson finally speaks, revealing his truth. He confesses that he's actually French, having assumed the identity of the British soldier he buried to secure a chance at evacuation. The revelation silences the group as they're forced to confront the harsh reality of each other's desperation for survival. The scene transitions back to the chaotic waters off Dunkirk as the beleaguered boat floats away from the beach, but disaster strikes when it begins to sink. In a frantic effort to save themselves, the soldiers scramble to patch the bullet holes, but their attempts prove futile. Realizing they have no choice, they dive into the water. In the turmoil, Gibson becomes entangled in a chain, tragically drowning as the others escape. Meanwhile, across the English Channel, the Royal Navy begins commandeering private boats to aid in the rescue of stranded soldiers at Dunkirk. Among these civilians are Dawson and his son Peter, who refuse to hand over their vessel to the authorities. Instead, they set out on their boat, the Moonstone, determined to make a difference. They're soon joined by a young helper, George, who insists he can be of assistance. As they navigate their way towards Dunkirk, they encounter a sunken bridge British ship. Perched atop the wreckage is a shivering, shell-shocked soldier. With compassion, they approach and pull him aboard. When Dawson asks for his name, the soldier is silent, consumed by fear. He panics, urging them to turn back, insisting, "Get me back to land, I have a bomb to build." Despite the soldier's frantic pleas to turn back, Dawson stands firm, determined to save as many soldiers as possible. Frustrated by the soldier's constant insistence, Peter locks him in a compartment, but the soldier manages to escape through a small opening. He demands once more that they turn the boat around. When Dawson, Peter, and George remain resolute, the desperate soldier attempts to seize control of the boat during a scuffle. In the chaos, he pushes George, who falls into the lower deck and hits his head. Seeing this, Peter rushes to tend to George's wounds while the soldier grapples with the consequences of his actions. Unfortunately, George has struck his head so hard that he loses his eyesight. In this critical moment, he confides in Peter, expressing his pride in joining the mission and his desire to do something significant. Realizing that George requires urgent medical attention, Peter turns to his father for guidance. But Dawson is unwavering, stating they've come too far to turn back. Meanwhile, above the chaos, 3 Royal Air Force Spitfires streak towards Dunkirk, ready to provide crucial cover for the evacuation. However, their operation is limited to just 1 hour due to dwindling fuel supplies, adding urgency to their mission. As the chaos unfolds, Dawson, Peter, and George spot a squadron of German fighter planes soaring above, leading to an intense dogfight. Amidst the fierce aerial battle, one of the German planes shoots down the squadron leader, leaving Collins and the remaining pilots to fend for themselves. As the battle rages on, Collins's Spitfire is struck by enemy fire, forcing him to crash land in the ocean. He frantically attempts to escape from the cockpit, which is jammed shut as his aircraft starts to sink. Just as he is about to drown, Dawson and Peter arrive just in time to pull him from the water, quickly helping him onto their boat before resuming their rescue mission. Meanwhile, Ferrier makes the tough decision to continue with the evacuation efforts, fully aware that he may never return home. As the urgency of the situation mounts, more private boats join the rescue operation, ready to face the perilous journey ahead. As the British boats arrive in the waters to rescue the stranded soldiers, a group of survivors spots a minesweeper and swims toward it, clinging to the hope of safety. Their dreams are quickly dashed when the vessel comes under attack from a German bomber plane. The explosion sends a torrent of oil spewing into the water, coating the soldiers in a slick black layer. Tragedy strikes as the ignited oil ignites, resulting in the horrifying deaths of several soldiers struggling to stay afloat. Just as the enemy bomber prepares for another assault, Ferrier manages to shoot it down, temporarily thwarting the threat. However, he soon runs low on fuel, forcing him to activate the gliding mode and navigate toward the beach for a landing. Meanwhile, Peter, Collins, and the shivering soldier race to the explosion site, pulling as many men as they can onto their boat, including Alex and Tommy. In a somber moment, Alex discovers that George is no longer alive, delivering the heartbreaking news to Dawson and Peter, who can only grieve in silence. Meanwhile, the nameless, shell-shocked soldier, oblivious to the tragedy, asks Peter if George will be okay. To shield the soldier from further trauma, Peter lies, assuring him that George will be fine. The threat is far from over, as another German bomber plane appears on the horizon, sending everyone's heart racing once again. But Ferrier, undeterred by the danger, bravely pursues the enemy aircraft, managing to shoot it down despite being in gliding mode. He then lands his Spitfire on the beach beyond the perimeter, burns it, and calmly awaits capture. In the aftermath of the harrowing events, Dawson and the other private boat owners finally return home, having rescued more than 300,000 soldiers. Commander Bolton decides to stay behind to oversee the evacuation of French forces, bidding farewell to Colonel Wynant and the last batch of British troops. This operation is marked as one of the largest evacuations in history, often referred to as a miracle, significantly shifting the momentum of the war and pushing the Germans back. Upon their arrival in England, the soldiers are sent home via train. During the journey, Alex expresses concern about facing disdain for returning home after the war's apparent defeat. The film closes, leaving audiences reflecting on the courage, sacrifice, and resilience of those who faced unimaginable odds during one of history's most significant moments. Hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to our channel for more great content. Thank you for watching.